Hello, welcome. Adam Thomas from Balancing Touch Reflexology. So good to see you, and thanks for joining me today. So, reflexology in general is pretty, it's not that difficult to work on the feet, right? If we're talking foot reflexology here. So, you have 2 feet that are in front of you, and you can adjust yourself, and you can get in the right position, and then the feet are right there ready for you to work on, and it's quite easy, right? But there are some instances where the reflexes that you're working on can be a little bit challenging. Like, for example, the toes. They sort of stick outside of the main part of the foot, right? Because the main part of the foot you can push against and it doesn't really move around too much, right? But the toes, if you push them around, they move around, and depending on the person you're working with, can have kind of long, flexible toes, and so when you're working with them, they can be all flopping around, and it can be kind of a difficult thing to work on, right? And some other reflexes are just difficult to find, right? Like for me, the kidneys and sort of the urinary system can be kind of hidden sometimes and hard to find, right? And so things like this. So I thought I would put together a little series on the reflexes that I've found, and also they've been confirmed a lot through my students. They'll come to me and ask me again after they've been shown how to work certain reflexes. I'd have to re-show them and work through how to get them. So in this series, I want to share with you some of the difficult reflexes to work, right? And the best way that I've found to tackle this. So in this video, I want to share with you how I work the plantar surface of toes and also the dorsal surface of the toes, right? Basically the front of the toes and the back of the toes, right? So let's go, and I'll transform this room into my session room, and I'll show you how I work on them. So one of the biggest challenges as a reflexologist when working on the feet is the toes, I find, right? Because they move around so easily and they're not a big structure to push against, like the ball of the foot, for example, or the heel or the bottom of the foot. All this is easy to work against when doing reflexology. But the toes, they kind of flop around and they're individual. Some people have longer toes, so it can be a lot more floppy and hard to work with. So I want to show you a couple techniques on how to work with the toes. So first of all, let's get these socks off. These are kind of cool socks, look, toe socks. Okay, so if you're ever taking these off, one by one seems to be the best to do. Okay, and I always like to take off the client's socks and put them back on too, just as a nice practice. So working with the toes, because the big part of the foot has, basically the whole leg to work against and all the muscle structures and stuff, it's easy to work with, right? You can push against it and it sort of bounces back and doesn't let it be pushed around too much. But the toes, when you start pushing on them, flop around like crazy, right? So one of the rules of thumb to do here is simply having some kind of base or backboard to work off of, right? So one of the simplest things you can do here is just covering the toes, okay? So just having one hand completely cover the toes. So as you can see there, I'm just allowing my index finger to go over all the toes. And this is a really good habit to get into, because by doing this, you're also protecting the nail, right, on the other side here. So if you're squishing against the nail, sometimes people have ingrown toenails and things like that. Here, I'll show you on the big toe here, because she actually has one where it digs in there. And so squishing here on the nail bed when working is not going to be the most comfortable at all, right? So it's going to be really good to have a back base. So that's the first thing, is just to have a base to work against. And then, how do you work, right? So there's a bunch of different ways. So now, as when I push on my thumb against the toe, you can see that it at least stops, right? Whereas before, it kind of just flops around. So that's one thing, is just having this. So when you're working the sinuses or the eyes and ears, or any of the head reflexes, this is a really great way to do it. And I tend to come down. So for example, if I'm working the sinuses, this is how I would work the sinuses, is I'd come up from above, up here, and I would come down over top of my hand, and then I would walk down the pad of the toe, right? And then when I get to the bottom, I just give a nice little hook up. This is also good if you want to do dead into the center. You can kind of do a rolling and holding action, right? But now, as you can see, I'm working against my hand, and then I'm also working my hands together, right? So if the toe wasn't there, I'm kind of doing this kind of a format where I can push right in, right? Just so the toe's there, right? And by doing that, by working over top of my hand, again, I'm not hurting the nail bed. Where if I was just working like this, which I see a lot of reflexologists do, so if you're working just like this and pushing straight in, these fingers on the other side, because you're not focused too much on them, can end up hurting the nail bed here, right? So when you actually apply the hand and work down, you are really protecting the nail bed there, right? So that's one sort of rule of thumb. Basically, getting a nice back board to work on, right? So when you flip over to the other side here, again, the toes are going to flop around if you don't support them good. And so what I use is my thumb to do good support on that. And because the thumb is wider, it's a good one to use. And then what I would do is use my finger, right, to walk down the back. So for example, if you're doing teeth and jaw, you would work down this way, right? So a good tip here is to work all your fingers together, even though the focus is on the index finger working. Can you see how all of my fingers are working together? So these, my middle finger and my third and fourth, are kind of all joining forces here to almost push against the index finger, right, when I'm walking. So the focus is, and the pressure is with the index finger, but all the other fingers are supporting that as well. And then on the back side too, my thumb is holding in place. So I'm working against my thumb and index finger, right? So I'm working like that. So if there isn't a toe there, I can put my finger in there, and you can see just working down that way how it works. Okay, so this has been really useful when working with the toes. So hopefully that helps you. The toes can be challenging, right? Like I said before, some of them flop around and that sort of thing. But when you have a really great support system for the toes to work against, it makes your job as a reflexologist so much easier. And then also for the client, it makes it so much more comfortable, right? It's like you, when you feel more confident about doing reflexology and comfortable doing it, and you have more, I don't know, for lack of better words, control over the foot, right? It translates into the client as being way more comfortable, and yeah, it just comes across as being more confident, and you know what you're doing when you can really, hold the foot and steady it, right? So hopefully those little tips helped you. This is part of a series, so if you haven't subscribed to the channel, this might be a good time, because then you'll get the other videos. But in order to get the other videos, you have to hit that little bell icon after you subscribe, and then you can go up and click all videos, so that when the next part comes out, you'll be notified, right? So if you haven't subscribed, good chance to do it right now if you're into reflexology. So yeah, hope that helped. If you have any ways of working the plantar surface and the dorsal surface of the toes, let me know, or let us know in the comments below, right? So yeah, until next time, Adam Thomas from Balancing Touch Reflexology. Bye-bye. Oh yeah, remember to keep those feet happy. Bye-bye.